The Honourable Leader of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tomorrow, federal NDP leader Thomas Mulcair will be in Alberta. A golden opportunity for the Premier to meet face-to-face with the man who's appointed himself Alberta's #1 enemy and dispel the myths he believes about our oil sands. But instead, the Premier will be hobnobbing behind closed doors away from the accountability of journalists and the public at the invite-only Bilderberg conference in Virginia and sticking taxpayers with the $19,000 tab. Mr. Speaker, where are this Premier's priorities? Is it to stand here in Alberta and defend our most important industry from bullies like Thomas Mulcair? Or is it to attend secret cocktail parties on the taxpayer dime and let the bully have open season? To the Premier.
Good question.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am very pleased to be able to be attending a conference in Washington made up of international leaders who are making decisions and involved in decisions that affect the Canadian economy and the oil sands. And you know, Mr. Speaker, what's tremendously interesting to me is that this honourable member, before she was an honourable member, criticized the former Premier for rushing back to Alberta to try to convince someone who was never going to change their mind about the oil sands to change their mind. Mr. Speaker, my job and the job of our cabinet is to advance Alberta's interests, to support the oil sands, and that's what me and the Deputy Premier will be doing tomorrow, Mr. Speaker.
I hope the Premier knows there's a big difference between a movie director and the official leader of the federal opposition. Thank you, Mr. Given the exclusive and secret nature of the Bilderberg conferences, given no reporting of this conference is allowed, and given that Bilderberg's own website states that, quote, no resolutions are proposed, no votes are taken, and no policy statements are issued at the conferences, will the Premier tell us what possible justification or actual value is there for this $19,000 taxpayer-funded trip?
Mr. Speaker, I'll tell you that I have a pretty good sense of what the role of the Leader of the Opposition is. And I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I think that it's to support Alberta initiatives that matter for the future of this province in a constructive way. One of the reasons that we yesterday had tremendous opportunity to speak about advancing Alberta's interests was through the Western Premiers Conference, to get support from Western Premiers with respect to a Canadian energy strategy. At the very moment, Mr. Speaker, that this Leader of the Opposition was standing in the House saying that it wouldn't happen, it shouldn't happen, and it couldn't happen. And Mr. Speaker, it did.
Honourable Opposition Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since she's dodged the question a couple of times, I'm going to try it one more time. Given that the BC Premier, Gordon Campbell, attended Bilderberg in 2010 and the province's Conflict of Interest Commissioner was called in to investigate, and given the secretive nature of the Bilderberg meetings and the matters discussed, and given the only way to get into Bilderberg is by secret invitation, how can Alberta taxpayers know that they are getting something that actually advances our interests and not just for the personal networking opportunities for the Premier?
Mr. Speaker, I don't understand what the Leader of the Opposition's definition of secret is, Mr. Speaker, but at 4 o'clock yesterday we issued a press release. We're standing in the House today talking about this. I'll tell you, we're going to talk about Alberta's interests, and I'm very happy to continue to talk about it after this conference is over, Mr. Speaker, because I'll tell you that everything that we need to do as the government of Alberta is to ensure that opinion makers around the world understand who we are, what we do, why and how we do it to advance Alberta's interests and our economy, Mr. Speaker.